The street was quiet, too quiet for what was about to happen. In broad daylight, with neighbors watching from behind their curtains, the HOA president stood on the front lawn and ordered workers to change the locks on a house that wasn't hers. A large notice was slapped onto the door, property seized by HOA. No court order. No warning. Just authority spoken loudly enough to scare people into silence. One neighbor finally asked, "Isn't this a veteran's home?" She smirked. "He's been gone for months." No response. No one like that comes back. The mailbox still had his name on it. The American flag was still folded carefully inside the window. But his truck was gone, towed away like trash. Phones came out. Whispers spread. Some people knew the truth, but no one stepped forward. "This house is abandoned," she declared, her voice sharp with confidence. HOA rules. What she didn't know, what she never bothered to check, was that the man she erased from records wasn't missing. He was deployed. Still wearing the uniform. Still serving the country she was using as an excuse to steal his home. And when he finally came back, the street that watched in silence would witness something far louder than her authority. Justice. Drop your city or country in the comments so we can see how far this message travels. And if you stand for justice over arrogance, hit like and subscribe. This channel exists to tell the stories where truth fights back and wins. His name was Marcus Thompson, a man who believed in duty, honor, and keeping his promises. A black veteran in his early 40s, he had served multiple tours overseas, always putting the country above himself. He wasn't loud about his accomplishments. He didn't brag, didn't seek attention, and certainly didn't expect gratitude. To his neighbors, he was simply the quiet man next door who kept his lawn neat, waved politely, and occasionally helped carry groceries for an elderly neighbor. Years ago, Marcus had bought his house with every cent he had saved. It wasn't a mansion, but it was his sanctuary, a place he could call home, a place he could return to after every deployment and every grueling tour. He had paid his HOA dues on time, never once had a complaint filed against him, and had followed every rule to the letter. Then came the orders. Deployment overseas. Marcus trusted the system, confident that his home would remain safe while he served his country. He double-checked the locks, secured the windows, and left detailed contact information in case of emergencies. He even prepaid his HOA dues for the coming months. The HOA president, however, saw his absence not as a deployment but as an opportunity. Power-hungry and arrogant, she had a reputation for bending rules to her advantage and intimidating anyone who dared question her authority. Marcus didn't know it yet, but she was already plotting to seize his home while he was away, using his deployment as the perfect excuse. To Marcus, this was just another day in service. To the HOA president, it was her chance to claim something that wasn't hers. And while neighbors whispered and watched from behind closed doors, Marcus's quiet, disciplined life was about to collide with a woman who thought she could steal from a soldier and get away with it. The stage was set. The silence before the storm was deafening. While Marcus was thousands of miles away, serving his country in a war zone, the HOA president wasted no time. She prowled the quiet suburban streets like a predator, eyes scanning for signs of weakness, and found exactly what she was looking for, an empty house with its owner absent. It began with small, seemingly innocent notices slipped under the door, a slightly overgrown lawn, a few weeds, a mailbox that wasn't emptied daily. To any reasonable homeowner, these would have been minor reminders. But Marcus wasn't there, and she knew that. She compounded these minor infractions into official violations, printing them on HOA letterhead and stamping them with authority. Next came the fines. Hundreds, then thousands of dollars, all justified by rules no one had ever enforced before. The HOA board, either too timid or too corrupt to intervene, rubber-stamped every notice. They didn't know Marcus personally, didn't ask questions, and certainly didn't challenge her actions. They were complicit, either out of fear or convenience. But the HOA president wanted more than just fines. She wanted public domination. She visited the house daily, walking past neighbors who watched in silence. Some whispered among themselves, concerned about the aggressive overreach, but fear kept them quiet. After all, who would challenge a woman wielding HOA power like a weapon? She began to post bold, confrontational signs: property in violation, access restricted, HOA rules enforced. Her tone left no room for negotiation. Even the mailbox bore her mark, a declaration that the house belonged to the HOA, and by extension, to her judgment. Workers followed her instructions without question, trimming bushes at odd angles, painting over minor marks, and filing reports that exaggerated every minor flaw. One neighbor noticed the locks were being tampered with, but by the time they called to check, the HOA president waved them off. This is routine. Nothing to worry about. Her arrogance grew with each passing day. The fines piled up, the violations escalated, and the neighborhood began to gossip. Yet no one dared confront her openly. She basked in the power, imagining herself untouchable. She even joked in front of the board that Marcus had abandoned his property, that no soldier ever really returned home, and that this was the perfect opportunity to set an example. By the time Marcus's deployment reached its midpoint, she had already changed mail slots, rearranged his driveway, and even hinted at auctioning off certain abandoned items. The neighborhood, once quiet and orderly, felt a growing tension. Phones discreetly captured her audacity, whispers spread like wildfire, but no one acted. And all the while, Marcus remained unaware, thousands of miles away, trusting the system, believing that his home, and his rights, were secure. Little did she know, the very man she assumed powerless was about to return. The storm she had started in his absence was far from over, and it was about to find its rightful eye. By the time Marcus's deployment was nearing its end, the HOA president had transformed the quiet neighborhood into a stage for her own show of power. What had started as a series of fines and letters escalated into open intimidation, and the house he had fought to own now felt like enemy territory. Early one morning, she arrived with a team of workers and a moving van. The front door was forcibly unlocked, new locks were installed. A large, bright sign was nailed above the mailbox: property seized by HOA. It wasn't subtle, she wanted everyone watching to understand who held the power. Neighbors peeked through blinds and over fences, their phones recording every humiliating moment, but most remained silent, unwilling to confront her authority. The workers moved swiftly, removing items from the garage, taking away Marcus's truck, even dragging out personal belongings like lawn furniture and tools. She announced to anyone who would listen, "This house is abandoned. Any trespassers will be prosecuted under HOA rules." Inside, she rifled through his documents, tossing papers in the air for dramatic effect. It wasn't about necessity, it was about public domination, making the absence of Marcus seem permanent and irreversible. At the neighborhood association meeting later that day, she flaunted her conquest. She spoke with an exaggerated confidence, detailing her version of events: the unpaid fines, the alleged violations, and the abandonment of property. Her tone left no room for debate. When a neighbor dared to ask if the homeowner had been notified, she sneered. He left. He forfeited his rights. This is what happens when people disappear. Even the local sheriff received calls, but she presented her case with a confident twist of half-truths: trespassing complaints, unpaid HOA dues, property abandoned. He left, believing her version, and Marcus's house sat under her control, like a trophy in her hands. Neighbors were stunned, whispers spreading quickly, some in disbelief, some outraged, and some silently condemning the lawlessness, but still, no one stepped forward. A few took videos, but the sense of injustice was suffocated by fear. The humiliation didn't end there. Word spread across the street: Marcus's property was now off limits, his truck gone, and his home filled with strangers. His absence was weaponized against him. She even went so far as to call the neighborhood children over, making them watch as belongings were carried out, an audacious display meant to intimidate anyone who might support him. And yet, the deeper irony was that Marcus had trusted the system, prepaying his dues, securing his home, and ensuring legal compliance before deployment. Every step she took was illegal: changing locks without notice, removing property without permission, and falsifying violations. But she didn't care. Authority, in her mind, equaled immunity. Her arrogance grew daily, her actions bolder, her public display of power more theatrical. For the first time, the neighborhood felt a chilling imbalance. The quiet, disciplined soldier was gone, and a woman with unchecked ambition ruled the street. But the story wasn't over. Far across the world, Marcus's deployment was drawing to a close. He had no idea of the storm that awaited him, no clue that the home he had served to protect was now a stage for humiliation. Yet the seeds of justice were already planted, waiting for his return. Because the moment Marcus stepped back onto that street, the neighborhood would witness something no amount of fines, intimidation, or theatrics could erase: the truth of who truly owned that house, and the power of a soldier who never abandoned his post. The plane touched down, wheels scraping the tarmac, and Marcus Thompson stepped onto American soil, unaware of the chaos that had unfolded in his absence. Months of deployment had hardened him in ways few could understand, but nothing had prepared him for the shock waiting on his own street. Driving up the familiar suburban lanes, Marcus noticed the first signs of something amiss. His mailbox, once clean and proud with his name displayed, now bore a bright, almost mocking notice: property seized by HOA. His heart tightened. At first, he thought it was a prank. But as he turned into his driveway, his eyes took in the full scope of the humiliation: his truck gone, the garage door slightly ajar, and workers bustling inside as though it were a property for sale. A crowd of neighbors had gathered at a distance, some whispering, some recording on their phones. The HOA president, standing at the front of his house with a clipboard in hand, looked up and immediately recognized him. Her confident smirk faltered. For the first time, the woman who had ruled this street without challenge felt the stirrings of fear. "Marcus Thompson," she said, feigning composure, though her voice carried a subtle tremor. I didn't expect you back so soon." Marcus stepped out of his car slowly, letting the moment stretch, letting every neighbor see him calm, composed, and in full uniform. He didn't yell, didn't charge, didn't threaten. His presence alone was authority incarnate, a living reminder that she had overstepped. "I did my duty," he said quietly, voice firm, carrying just enough weight to silence murmurs. "I served overseas. And I left my home in good faith, trusting the law." The HOA president laughed nervously. "Oh, this is just HOA protocol. You've been gone too long. Rules are rules, Mr. Thompson." Marcus pulled out a folder from his bag. He opened it carefully, letting the documents fall into view for anyone watching: deployment orders, proof of prepaid dues, and correspondence showing every step he had taken to comply with HOA regulations. But that wasn't all. He had also contacted a military lawyer the moment he learned of the violations, a lawyer who had reviewed the illegal seizures and prepared a notice for immediate enforcement. The crowd began to shift uncomfortably as he spoke, his calm, measured voice cutting through the tension. "Every action you've taken, changing locks, removing property, posting false notices, has been illegal. And you did it under the assumption that absence equals abandonment. That is not how the law works. That is not how justice works." The HOA president's face went pale. She opened her mouth, tried to speak, but no words came. The neighbors, once intimidated, now whispered among themselves, sensing the reversal of power. Phones captured everything. The smirk that had once signaled control was gone, replaced by a tight-lipped panic. Then came the final blow. Marcus picked up his phone and made a single call, direct to the sheriff's office. He calmly explained the situation, cited the illegal acts, and confirmed the involvement of legal counsel. Within minutes, uniformed officers arrived, not to protect her claims, but to restore Marcus's property and enforce the law. The HOA president tried to protest, tried to claim authority, tried to wield fear, but every lie she had told, every act of intimidation, now crumbled under the weight of facts and legal authority. Her board members, once silent accomplices, turned away, unwilling to be implicated. The neighbors who had recorded her arrogance now shared the videos openly, documenting her defeat. Marcus didn't yell, didn't humiliate. He simply walked into his house, reclaimed his belongings, and stood in his doorway. His eyes met hers briefly, and the silent message was clear: you tried to steal from someone who served this country. You failed. And for the first time, the street understood the truth. Absence does not mean surrender. Service does not mean weakness. Authority does not equal justice. The power had shifted, silently but irrevocably. What had started as humiliation, intimidation, and theft had ended with calm, undeniable truth. The twist wasn't in chaos or confrontation, it was in Marcus's return, his presence, and the unstoppable force of law, morality, and respect converging in front of everyone who had watched her rise unchecked. For the HOA president, this was a moment she would never forget. For Marcus, it was a quiet reminder that while she had tested boundaries, he had served not just his country, but justice itself. The street that had once watched in silence now stood frozen, caught between disbelief and anticipation. What began as a quiet suburban abuse of power was about to unravel in front of everyone who had ignored it. And this time, there would be no hiding behind HOA rules or false authority. Within hours of Marcus's return, an emergency HOA board meeting was called. Word spread fast. Neighbors who had stayed behind closed doors now filled the community hall, standing shoulder to shoulder, phones raised, whispers sharp with curiosity and guilt. The same people who had been afraid to speak were suddenly eager to witness the outcome. Marcus arrived calmly, no longer in uniform, but carrying himself with the same disciplined authority. He wasn't alone. 2 representatives from a military legal office walked beside him, their presence alone enough to shift the room's energy. Conversations died instantly. The HOA president sat at the front table, posture stiff, her confident demeanor gone. She attempted to open the meeting, but one of the attorneys interrupted politely and firmly. This meeting is now a formal legal review. The room went silent. Evidence appeared on a large screen. One by one, the lies were exposed. Fabricated violation notices. Fines issued during an active duty deployment. Lock change invoices dated without court approval. Videos recorded by neighbors showing the illegal seizure of property. Each document landed like a hammer, cracking what little authority she had left. Murmurs spread. Faces shifted. Some board members avoided eye contact. Others looked visibly shaken. Marcus stood when asked to speak. His voice was steady, controlled, and impossible to ignore. I didn't abandon my home, he said. I was deployed. Serving this country. Every fine, every notice, every action taken against my property was done knowing I could not respond. The attorney followed with a single sentence that changed everything. Under federal law, these actions constitute unlawful seizure and discrimination against an active duty service member. The HOA president stood abruptly. That's not true, she snapped, desperation bleeding through her words. He didn't respond. HOA rules allow. Sit down, the attorney said calmly. She froze. The sheriff entered moments later, removing his hat in a quiet sign of respect toward Marcus. He apologized publicly for relying on false information. Then he turned toward the HOA president. You misrepresented facts. You used my department to intimidate residents. That ends now. The room erupted. Neighbors began speaking, one after another. A woman described being threatened for questioning the fines. A man admitted he'd been warned not to interfere. Others confessed they'd recorded everything, afraid but unwilling to destroy evidence. The truth spilled uncontrollably. The HOA board voted on the spot. The result was unanimous. The president was removed from her position effective immediately. Her face drained of color. The power she'd built through fear collapsed in seconds. Then came the final blow. Marcus was awarded full restoration of his property, financial compensation for damages, and all fines were erased. The HOA was ordered to revise its bylaws and submit to external oversight. Legal consequences loomed for every forged document she had signed. As the meeting ended, neighbors gathered around Marcus, not with pity, but with respect. Some apologized. Others thanked him for standing up when they couldn't. He didn't celebrate. He didn't boast. He simply nodded. Outside, the sun cast long shadows across the street she once ruled. The house that had been taken was returned, not just physically, but symbolically. Fear had lost. Truth had won. And the woman who believed power could silence justice learned a lesson she would never escape. You can steal locks. You can post notices. But you can't erase a soldier who never stopped standing his ground. In the days that followed, the neighborhood felt different, lighter, quieter, honest in a way it hadn't been before. The fear that once hung in the air had lifted, replaced by a shared understanding of what happens when silence is finally broken. Marcus walked back into his home slowly, taking in the familiar creak of the floorboards, the walls he had painted with his own hands, the space that had waited for him while he served far away. Nothing felt triumphant. It felt earned. Neighbors began stopping by, not out of curiosity, but respect. Some apologized for staying silent. Others admitted they'd wanted to speak up but were afraid of retaliation. Marcus listened without judgment. He understood fear, but he also understood responsibility. The HOA changed. New leadership was installed. Rules were rewritten with transparency, and an independent review board was added to ensure no one could ever weaponize authority like that again. The signs came down. The locks were restored. The street returned to normal, but wiser. One evening, Marcus stood on his porch as the sun dipped low, the American flag once again hanging where it belonged. He didn't think about revenge. He thought about balance. About how power collapses the moment truth steps forward. The woman who tried to steal his home lost more than a title, she lost the illusion of control. And the neighborhood learned a lesson that would echo far beyond those streets. Justice doesn't shout. It waits. And when it arrives, it speaks clearly enough for everyone to hear.